And so welcome to 91.9 Public Affairs and APSU-TV. I'm Micah Terrell, and I'm working on the series Women in the Media. And today we have a really great opportunity to talk to a writer and content producer, and that's our Govs alum, Abbi Wilt. Abbi, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Micah. I'm glad to be here.
So Abbi, tell us all about, so in your work as a writer and content producer, you've sort of leaned into the freelance work as part of your journey. Kind of explain to us how that kind of happened, that leaning into.
Sure. So I started my career at a national women's magazine, which was really fun and a lot of great opportunities for storytelling. And I think even when I was young, those seeds for storytelling started really early in my life. And when I had the chance to write for the magazine, that kind of just furthered my love of it. And I moved to the YMCA after working. I'm sorry, am I allowed to mention the name of where I worked? Is that okay? Yeah. I moved from the magazine to the YMCA and I started doing more content production, but more in the side of marketing. And I realized in that role, the storytelling aspect, something I really love and I find really fulfilling. I'm doing less of that in that role. If you've worked in marketing, you know what that's like. It's more salesy, it's more, KPI oriented, and you're always trying to hit goals. And there were some great opportunities for storytelling there, but none that were really filling that little need inside of me of especially generational stories that, just to give you a little bit of context, Micah, my great grandmother survived the Armenian genocide, and it's been really important to my family to preserve her legacy through storytelling. And so I knew from a really young age, this is really important that I continue this. And so even as I was moving through my career in different roles, especially ones where I felt like, you know what, I'm not maybe doing that fulfilling storytelling work that I hold really near and dear. And I'm doing other great work, of course, but I want to do more of that. And so during that period of time, I decided I had a great opportunity with a gal who started her own business for writing heirloom life storybooks. And that was my first foray into freelancing. And I realized very quickly, okay, sometimes the marketing side can be a bit draining, but this side is actually recharging me. The freelancing side, getting to write those stories, is giving me life. And so I started freelancing at that point, and I was doing both. I was doing a full-time job and I was freelancing. And when folks heard that I was freelancing, that's the beauty of the magazine industry. I really appreciate the folks who have helped me to get to where I am. I had a few other folks reach out to me and say, hey, I heard you're doing some freelance work. Would you consider writing this piece? And slowly but surely, I started to build a little bit of a client roster. And I moved to Oregon this past year, and I left my job because the time difference just didn't work. And I thought to myself, okay, what do I do now? I have such great experience on my career path. I have some great experience in my freelancing, and it is a little bit of a brave step and a terrifying step to decide, you know what, I'm just going to try it and see what happens. And so that's where I kind of started. I took the freelance clients I had, which I think were 2 at the time. And then I thought, okay, I need to build this up to make it really work. I probably need 5 anchor clients. And so I cold emailed folks, I asked around, and I built up that roster to a point where, I was getting to do a lot of really interesting, fun work that varied from client to client, really focusing on, changing brand voice every day. And it's hard to juggle a lot of priorities when everyone has, a different priority, but everyone's for a different brand, a different company. But I really decided that I was just going to do it, and I was going to give freelancing a year and just see what happened. And in that time, I got to go back to that really beautiful storytelling work that I loved. And I also got to dabble in the social media side of social media management. I got to take on a client who runs a boutique hotel. And for me, someone, one day I would love to open my own bed and breakfast. It was really cool to learn the ins and outs of the hotel business. And so each client I took on selfishly had a little piece of something I found joy in that wasn't just marketing and sales. But it allowed me to create deeper connection with more folks in more industries. And it's been really rewarding. It's been sometimes a tough journey, but always a wonderful journey. And I get to pick and choose the kind of work that I do, which is really a privilege, I think, in our industry.
That it really is awesome. Yeah, I bet that's great. And I noticed too that it seems like a lot of contacts are part of it How did building contacts help you in that journey too? Because obviously probably, one thing leads to another, right?
Absolutely. I do think the phrase "it's all about who you know" is a bit of a cliche, and I wish it was less relevant than it is. But truly, and this is why it's important to me to, when I have the opportunity to, if there's a piece I can't cover, to like recommend another writer, it really is about context, Micah. And it's about one, forging those connections and lifting other people up. And then at the same time, I would not be where I am now if there were other women in the media industry who then recommended me and put my name on the table in those rooms. And I'm so grateful for that. But I think that is even more important as to why we continue to do that, to create spaces for other women to thrive in those. Because yeah, like I said, I wouldn't have, I currently freelance for the magazine Southern Living that I worked for right out of college. And I wouldn't have those opportunities if I hadn't created those relationships, and been recommended by folks. And it all kind of intertwines together to lift you to where you are. So yes, any of that relationship building side that you can get your hand in is a great thing. And I think there's moments of, especially early on in your career, when you're starting in something. I started in Southern Living as a fellow, which is essentially like a year-long internship program. That was straight out of Austin P. I got that because of my time in the communications department. And there were moments of, okay, this doesn't necessarily feel like it fits my job description, but I'm just going to say yes. And I'm going to see how I can show up and take it as a learning opportunity. And it might not feel like my job, but now I see the fruits of that. And I see the fruits of those relationships, of just being willing to say yes. And sometimes being willing to be uncomfortable, in learning a new skill. Yeah, so contacts truly are the foundation for a lot of freelance work and a lot of media work, but freelance work especially.
And you bring up internships and then Austin P. And I guess it's a two-part question then. Tell me how your work with, in public relations and the classes and all the teachers that you had and professors, please talk about what you learned from them. And then also you kind of hinted at what your internship gave you too. So if you could tackle first what you got from the professors in your classes and then your internship.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to look back, Micah, on my course load and the courses I took and the ones that I kind of took for fun in the communications department and how they have now served me significantly in my future roles. And then others, like for instance, my major was public relations and I had a minor in journalism. And I quickly learned going into the magazine industry, oh, public relations is a 24/7 job. And that's something I'm not sure I want to dive into. I was constantly getting pitches from public relations reps constantly. But my time at Austin P and those classes actually helped equip me on the other end of that of, okay, this is what this person is after. This is how I can best respond. So even though I wasn't the one doing the pitching in those spaces, my time doing my PR classes, literally intro to PR, I'm like, oh, this is how to break this down. This is what they're after. If I'm reading a press release, this is where I'm going to get all the information. These are the contacts. One of my classes, like I mentioned, that maybe I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take this for fun because I think it's interesting. I took an InDesign class, and you would be surprised how many, like that is the class that I have now used almost more than all of my other experience. And it's funny that I do a lot of video content, and I didn't end up taking broadcast classes. And I look back on my time and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have sampled more of that, because it would have been great to have that experience before just kind of being thrown into, like I said, trying those new opportunities. It's been great to have that. So I guess then a little snippet of advice, if I can throw that in there to other students, would be really, even if you don't think it's the thing that you want to do with your life, especially if you're going into media and our current climate of media, those little skills will all come together and help you along the way. Even if it's not the thing, even if you don't think you're going to work in broadcast media, now here I am as a content producer. It all is intertwined. And that's why it's so important to sample all of those classes and to just try them out. Because even if you try it and you decide, hey, this is maybe not the thing I want to do, you have that experience and you have that knowledge, and you will never even guess the ways that that will apply in your future career, like my InDesign example for Photoshop specifically. I mean, even something as simple, Micah, as like having Macs in our computer lab, and I learned how to edit on a Mac. And now, that is my go-to, and that's one of our industry standards in a lot of the work that I do. So, yes, for the first part of your question, making sure I answer that fully.
Yeah.
I think my public relations classes for sure. I had some great classes with Dr. Parker that have really helped me just frame. There was one about gender dynamics and how we communicate and recognizing bias, and I thought that that has carried a long way in my career of learning how to be an active listener, how to show up and support people, which is crucial to when it comes to written communication and other forms of communication. And then Dr. Parcell taught my InDesign class. I had some great classes with Dr. Morris. Dr. Morris?
Yes, Dr. Morris.
Yeah, so
I mean, yeah.
Thrilled to get to sample those, and it really has helped me through my career. And then the second part of your question, would you mind repeating that again?
Oh yeah, no, the internships, because yeah, I guess it all kind of builds, right? You have those skills that, like you're saying, you build on, like with the InDesign class and with the public relations class and all the listening skills that we learn, and writing and editing, and then you add that to your internship too. How did that internship and those skills carry you from there?
Absolutely. So I remember a distinct moment. It was the very end of my senior year, and I always wanted to work at Southern Living. That was my goal. I just wanted to be a magazine editor. It seemed so glamorous. And it really changed, when I was a teenager, it was like, I want to work at 17 in New York. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, the thing I really care about is Southern food and culture and travel. So I just shot my shot, if you will. And I do believe that that's so important when you're a senior in college. Striving for opportunities that maybe you don't even think you're going to get, but you won't know until you do it. And so I applied for this internship with Southern Living. And I distinctly remember the gal who hired me, she brought me in and she said to me, I brought you in here not because you were the most qualified. You didn't have any magazine experience. And a lot of the folks I was competing against had done internships in New York. She said, I brought you in not because you're the most qualified, but because you're the most passionate. And I think that's an important thing that I've carried with me, because you can learn a lot of things. You can learn the technical side of things. You can learn how to do stuff. But if you can show up with passion, that's something that is unparalleled, and that's something that's super unique to you, right? So that was how I kind of got my foot in the door of just being really passionate. And then day one going into that fellowship program, I think I was with like 50 other fellows. All of us were working in different departments, and I was working supporting editors in special editions and style, and all of those journalism skills and writing skills specifically. All of the practice I had done at Austin P kind of led up to those moments of supporting, fact checking, editing. Even just organization and like getting my life in order, my task management. Yes. All of those things kind of came together and really laid a foundation for my career. And then it ended up going back to what I was saying about things that, quote, aren't your job, but you should lean into. One of the other fellows and I, Southern Living did not have a video presence at that point. Like, we had dabbled in it, but there was not a specific, allotment for video. One of the fellows and I, after hours, we would just create videos and just like fun little things. Because again, a learning opportunity. I had never done video before. And fun fact, my hands were Southern Living's first ever viral video. So we made Oreo balls just on the side after hours. He had two interns. And that ended up paving the way for my role to manage video at Southern Living. So again, going back to taking those opportunities when you have them, even if you don't know what the fruit of that will be now, planting those seeds is so, so important. And those seeds really start by, okay, what are the skills, the practical skills I can learn in college that I can carry then with me into my career? So I'm so grateful for the classes and the foundation that Austin P laid for me.
Yeah. And like you said, though, like the passion, you can't buy it. You can't, you just have it. And I think
teach passion.
You can't teach passion. So that's awesome that it helped, along with the other, right. The other things too, which is fantastic. So if you're just tuning in and joining us, I'm Micah Terrell with 91.9 Public Affairs and APSU-TV. I'm talking with Abbi Wilt. She's a writer and content producer who is, of course, a Govs alum who has taken the skills and moved on to bigger and better things. So you work for a variety of clients and you've handled lots of different accounts through the industry. We've got tourism with, with the hotel account, nonprofits, social media. Which one did you enjoy the most and why?
That's a great question. It's hard to choose. I would kind of equate that to choosing a favorite child, and I'm
Right.
not sure if you can
Yeah.
put that on air.
Mhm.
But I can say, truly, the most fulfilling work that I've been able to do in my professional career has been long form storytelling. And so I have a client, Memory Lane Jane, and we essentially, with that business, we go into someone's home, and sometimes children hire us, being like adult children, and sometimes the parents hire us. But essentially, what we do is write the full life story of someone in their family, whether that's, a mom hiring us to write a book about her grandmother, or a child writing us to write a book about their parent. It really runs the gamut, truly. And a lot of times, these moments of wanting a book about someone's life are coming at a moment of crisis. Someone is in ill health, someone, had just passed away, and they're trying to gather all the memories they can of them. So I would say there's nothing more humanizing and beautiful about our human experience than getting to go in and really fully experience someone's life through words. So with Memory Lane Jane, I'm the lead writer on that side. So I do a lot of the writing of the manuscripts, but I've also had the privilege of going in and doing the interviewing side. But we'll go into those situations and interview for 8, 10, 24 hours. And then we'll turn all of that content into a manuscript and then ghostwrite it from their voice. So it's their own autobiography. So it sounds like them. And then that turns into like a beautiful hardcover legacy heirloom book that they can pass down through generations. So like I said, it truly is just, sometimes they can be really long, and sometimes always you get into super nitty gritty details. But it's such a joy to be able to hand the family that finished book, and it is truly a treasure. My own family has experienced it. I had the joy of writing my grandmother's story. Yeah, there's nothing quite like being able to document those stories, because if you don't ask the questions, if you don't write it down, then it's gone for the next generation. And so, yeah, that has been a super fulfilling side of my freelance work. I'm thrilled that I would be able to get to be paid for something as wonderful as that, as providing that for a family. So
Yeah, that's an amazing memento to have too, because I think a lot
yeah,
of us think visually, right? We think, oh, the photo album, or like some of us have done, maybe digitizing old films and movies
yeah.
and so yeah, so especially in such a visual time, have you had a lot of demand for, this kind of way to remember a loved one?
Yes. And I think that's growing with, we have, I don't know if you've heard of Storyworth, but that is a new platform that came around, where folks can get an email question and then they answer it. But the beauty about the work we do is a lot of times in those scenarios, the loved one is saying, oh, I'm not a writer, or, oh, I can't do that. And so we're able to kind of come in and step up and be like, well, we're writers. We'll help you do that. We'll help you tell your story. And then those books are usually accompanied by 100, 200 photos with captions from that individual, or newspaper clippings, so that you really do get to see that finished product of the final book, plus little photos of this person's life, or little mementos of this person's life. And I do think that demand is growing, because I think we as a society are seeing the impact of generational stories. We are seeing why it's important. I mean, even with the rise of video and social media, I think we are learning to document those things more. I think it's funny to think about parents who are, having children now versus parents who had children 30 years ago, and just the number of tools we have to document that growing up journey, right? Some parents have thousands of photos of their kids, and my parents are
Right.
like, here's one photo album. um, but I think as we have more tools like that, we have a natural desire to capture those moments and those memories. And I try and spread that message to as many people as I can, just seeing the impact that it has had on my own family. But then I'm constantly like, you know what, just ask the questions. And sometimes it feels uncomfortable, and that's okay, because like I said before, sometimes really beautiful things come out of the uncomfortable. And a lot of times, like your grandparents, your parents, they do want to be asked and they do want to share because they love you, you know? So I just think it's such a crucial part of what we do, and how we set a good foundation for our future generations, and how we make sure that we're not repeating past things, you know, is through documentation. So it's really meaningful work.
That's a great story. And ghostwriting, how did you ever expect that you would be doing ghostwriting? I mean, that's what when you were telling me about it, I was like, wow, I never thought about that as taking, hey, good writing skills, good editing skills, good listening skills, putting it all together. Did you ever expect that to be something you'd be doing?
I really didn't. And it's funny, Micah, because now being a professional writer, there's moments when I think, do I know my own writing voice? Because I am now writing in every single piece I do for someone else's story. You know, I'm writing in the voice of your 87-year-old grandmother, and then I'm writing in the voice of a brand, and I'm writing, you know, a Southern brand is very different than a nonprofit brand. But ghostwriting is such a fulfilling job, and I think something that not a lot of people think about as an option for a career. But as we see this market grow, as we see more people want to record their stories, record their parents' stories, it comes very naturally to me that I would take what they're saying in that active listening role, and take those manuscripts, and you know, you have it all down. You just have to capture that voice on paper. You already have the words in the transcript. You just have to turn that into a polished piece. And that's yeah, essentially like a potter shaping some clay. You've got the hunk of clay, you just gotta mold it a little bit. So that has been a very fun part of my career, and one, like you mentioned, I just did not expect. But I've had the joy of writing to many different voices, and sometimes you have to go against the inner grammar side. Sometimes you have to go against the proper side. You're like, this is an APA, but
Yeah.
it's more important to write to that person's voice. In my grandmother's book, you know, we had tons of turns of phrase in there. She grew up in the Appalachian Mountains in the Great Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. And there were certain things that she said that I was like, this does not make sense. But for her family members who are reading it, we know that this is grandma. We can hear her voice in this. And so there's moments of, you know, battling within yourself of like, okay, how do I honor the integrity of someone's voice and their story, and maybe give up some of the other pressures, the edits, because what really matters here is how we're delivering this. And that is really the crux of being a ghostwriter. So
Yeah, that staying authentic is really, that sounds like a real challenge of that job, especially with how you're just want to stay true to that person's voice,
mm-hmm.
but at the same time, make sure that people can understand because you have a message to get across, or multiple messages actually. So that, yeah, that definitely seems like a challenge. What do you think has been your most challenging job that you've done so far?
I think in the ghostwriting world, similar to what we're talking about, just of acknowledging your own bias when you're going in to ghostwriting. You know, there's a lot of stories that we're writing of folks who have done many things in their life, things that you would agree with, things that you wouldn't agree with, things that they've processed, people they've hurt. And so there are definitely moments of, how do I, like you're saying, remain authentic to this person's voice? And how do I still make it readable? And how do I think about future generations? Because at the end of the day, this is who this is for. So without getting into too much detail, we had a story that we wrote, where the individual asked us to write it on their behalf, and they had a really successful business career. And you know, I got those interviews. It was like 10 hours of interviews, and I wrote that story. And they asked for their children to be interviewed as reflections in the book. And when we did the interviews with the children remarked, like, this person wasn't present in our lives. We don't remember, you know, them being there. And that's those are hard things to hold, right? Of, here I have this manuscript of this person who has looked at their life, and they're like, look at all the things I've done. Look at all the things I did for my family, you know? And then you simultaneously have to honor the who this is for being the children, of like, how do I stay authentic to their voice as well and their experience, and honor both of those things. And that can be really challenging. It's, you have a rose-colored glasses, and then but you want to make sure that everyone is happy with the final product. And thankfully, those are more few and far between. But I think that could just kind of speaks to, okay, this is where your skills come in as a writer, of like, how do you maintain both of those things? And I'm grateful that I, had the opportunities to do lots of writing. And in those moments, you just have to do it. You just have to hope, like, there's moments of just hoping for the best of like,
Yeah.
this isn't going to be perfect and everyone's going to have an opinion, but you just kind of have to start somewhere and get their feedback, and then, say, all right, is this feeling good for everyone? But yeah, that was definitely a challenging project.
Yeah, especially as a writer, and I commiserate with your feeling when you're writing, even if it's a story that is maybe for a newscast. When you're writing nonfiction in particular, there's always that chance that people will be like, nope, don't agree with you. But
Yeah,
you always striving, like you said, to find a good balance. But we never. It's people who don't write, you just gotta write to understand. It's always a struggle, but it's I think how we grow, right? We get to, you went through that, it's that challenge,
absolutely.
and now it's like, okay, that'll prepare you for the next, because I'm sure you'll have another really challenging
Yeah.
one to do, because that's very and along those lines, what advice do you have for students who are comm students, professional comm, who are writing like that, who are trying to find the right voice, or whatever their assignment is? What would you like to tell them if they're trying to break into ghostwriting or freelancing in general, or any of those things?
I would say certainly practice, but not in just the general overall practice. One of the things that I found very helpful is when I was going into the magazine world, I knew already, because the brand existed, what that expectation would be, right? So I kind of knew what that flow looked like, what those articles looked like, what those social media captions looked like. And I think sometimes folks get into a bind when someone asks them to submit samples and they're like, oh, I don't have samples. Well, great news. You can make samples based on the style of the thing you want. And so I think it's just so crucial to, if you know what you're hoping for, if you know that this is kind of the style of writing you want to do, if you know you want to go into ghostwriting, then ask some questions to your family members and practice. Or like, one thing that was really helpful in my career, when I was working at Southern Living, I oversaw video. I did producer brand liaison side, but I didn't touch a camera. And it wasn't until I went to the YMCA, where I was shooting and editing all of my own video, that I really learned that skill. And in those moments of, if you work for a nonprofit, it's just kind of, there's lots of hats and you fill in where you're needed. But in those moments of learning how to do video, I just took that camera home and I was just practicing shooting things. And it wasn't anything that necessarily, mattered or we would use for work. But I was, I think I created a dance reel for alumni Jade Mahoney. We love her.
Yeah.
And I just practiced doing some shooting on my street. And even though that felt really minimal at the time, each of those instances of practicing helped improve my framing, help improved how I, my ISO, and like making sure that my footage was clear. And those first videos that I made for the YMCA were not great videos. They were very amateur, but through that practice and that continual practice of, I know what they're looking for. This is what I'm trying to mimic. This is what I'm trying to match. Then I eventually grew to doing all of the video. And so I would just encourage students to, one, not be afraid to fail, because especially in the sense of when you're in college, like, that is the time to fail, and I don't mean that in a grim sense, but I mean that in the sense of, like, this is a safe space for you to try things and not enjoy them, or try things and find out you do really enjoy them, and experiment with what that looks like, and practice those things, and create those samples, or ask those questions, and have that ghostwriting experience, just because you're taking the time to practice. And it doesn't have to be for a professional publication. It doesn't have to be for, anything other than your goal of practicing. So I would just really encourage that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, not being afraid to step outside your comfort zone and take on something that isn't, quote, your job, so that you can try something new and, again, decide if that's something you enjoy. But you truly, I cannot emphasize enough how those little seeds, even if they do not feel like they make sense now, will plant different crops for you along the way in your career. And then you'll realize 5 years later, 10 years later, oh, this was something that I learned in college that I never thought I would use, but here I am relying on this because I did have the opportunity to explore that and explore that interest. So yeah, practice, get outside your comfort zone. Don't be afraid to fail. Maybe those are cliches.
No, those are great. And you know, I just had the same conversation literally with the class right before we were talking here, and it said, hey, you know, make your mistakes now. So when you get to the professional world, you like, I've already done that. And you could say I already did that. So yeah, make just do, because we'll learn. We really do. We'll never forget, right? Never forget. So Abbi, we talked about so much. What did I not ask you about you'd like to share?
Oh goodness. I feel like we covered a lot, Micah.
Mm.
I do want to clarify that I have made plenty of mistakes in my professional career, and it's okay to do that too, because the world is full of very good people and kind and supportive people. And there's some really great teams out there that, you know, will help lift you from those mistakes. And so that's not the end of the world either. I've certainly sent email newsletters out with links that don't work, or thought I proofread something 18 times, and then you get that edit blindness and there's a typo. But like you're saying, laying that foundation of practice, laying that foundation of learning, and I guess the pursuit of knowledge, if you will. Be curious, ask questions. It sounds, wow, I'm really throwing a lot of cliches into this, Micah, but
okay, but they work. They work. It's okay. Yeah, and thank you. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say being curious. I wanted to hop on that. Yes, please remind, because curiosity, you can't buy that either. It's so
cannot. Yep. As they say, there's no dumb question. And I think there's moments of feeling like, oh, maybe this feels like I should already know this. But like you were saying, college is the time to explore that, right? College is the time to ask those questions, to really better understand, what does the world look like? We have great professors who have a lot of experience, and they can share that, but they don't know what they don't know, and that what you need, right? So they won't know that you need that information until you ask the question. So that was something, I mean, I look back on my time at Austin P and just the supportive environment of the comms department and all of the professors. Like, I'm so grateful that it was a safe environment to ask questions and to be curious. Yeah, you can't buy curiosity or passion, and you can't you can't teach those things either. So,
but I know Dr. Morse misses you, and everybody says hi.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I wish I could come back through.
Yes. Well, we would be glad to have you. And just to remind everyone, in case you want to, AbbigailWilt.com, in case there's anybody who wants to check out your work and wants to say hey, and hey, freelancing, you always, yeah. So Abigail, Abbi Wilt, thank you so much for talking with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. It's been great chatting with you today.
Yeah. And I'm Micah Terrell with 91.9 Public Affairs and APSU-TV.